The 3:15 westbound train from New York to Chicago rumbled along the tracks under a golden sky when Marianne Norris quietly stepped onto car B, her soft yellow sundress fluttering around her calves, her gray hair pulled into a tidy bun, and a worn leather satchel slung over her shoulder containing crossword puzzles, classic novels, and a bundle of handwritten letters that smelled faintly of lavender and thyme. At 68, Marianne didn't command the room with presence or posture, but with a serene warmth that seemed to melt tension wherever she walked, and although few people recognized her, she had spent the last 35 years married to Chuck Norris, the pop culture icon, martial arts legend, and face of 1,000 memes. But Marianne never clung to the fame, never threw his name around. She had been a schoolteacher in small-town Texas, a mother of 2 boys, a believer in handwritten thank you notes, compassion over conflict, and strength wrapped in silence. As the train picked up speed, a man boarded at Newark, massive and mean-looking, arms covered in tribal tattoos, boots stomping loud and unapologetic. His name was Trent, and he made sure everyone knew he was the alpha of that train car, claiming a double seat with his duffel bag, sneering at a crying toddler, rolling his eyes at the conductor, and chewing his gum like it owed him money. Nobody challenged him. Until the train paused again in Harrisburg, and a young woman with trembling hands and a golden service dog stepped aboard, clutching a backpack and scanning for a place to sit. Marianne stood at once and offered her seat with a smile so gentle it nearly brought the girl to tears, but Trent scoffed loudly, muttering that this wasn't a kennel and jerking his boot in the dog's direction in a cruel gesture that made the retriever yelp softly, prompting Marianne to step in and say with quiet firmness, "That animal serves her and he deserves more respect than you do," a sentence that sliced through the tension like a blade through fog, turning every head in the car, and Trent, fueled by insecurity disguised as strength, stood up with a grunt, glared at her, and said, "What did you just say to me, old lady?" before raising his hand and slapping her hard across the face, so hard it echoed off the train walls, silencing everything, drawing gasps and dropped jaws. Yet Marianne didn't crumble, didn't retaliate, didn't so much as flinch except to gently dab the thin line of blood at her lip, and she said with remarkable calm, "You shouldn't have done that," just as a young man in the back lifted his phone and shouted, "You just hit Chuck Norris's wife," and suddenly phones were out, Google images and YouTube clips flooding the car with confirmation. Yes, that was her, that was Marianne, the same woman in interviews standing beside Chuck at veteran fundraisers, the same woman from his memoirs whom he once called, "the calm to my storm." And in that moment Trent's expression faltered, confusion bleeding into panic as the rest of the car began to stir, not because she was married to a famous fighter, but because her dignity, her refusal to retaliate, her astonishing inner power woke something in every single witness. The young mother he'd glared at earlier stood up with her baby in her arms, the old man with the cane clenched his jaw and declared, "You've been pushing people around all day, but not anymore," and the teenager he'd shouldered aside muttered, "You're done, man," and by the time the conductor returned, the train had become a courtroom of decency and courage, and Trent, a man who had walked on with a sneer, was escorted off in handcuffs by police at the next stop, reduced not by brute force, but by the quiet power of a woman who taught thousands of children that kindness was strength. And as the car exhaled a breath it had been holding for hours, a rare transformation began. The young woman with the dog sat taller. The teenager asked Marianne how to be brave like her. An old man told her she reminded him of his wife who passed last year, and even the woman with the baby left a note on Marianne's lap that read, "Thank you for protecting the light in the world," as others gathered to share stories of kindness, resilience, and moments when someone, often a stranger, stepped in to show them humanity still existed. And by the time the train neared Chicago, a notepad had made its way through the car, filled with thank you notes, drawings, hugs, and promises to do better, be braver, speak up, reminders of a ripple effect born from one woman's refusal to match cruelty with cruelty. And when Marianne finally stepped onto the Chicago platform, she was met not with flashing cameras or reporters, though some footage had gone viral by then, but with soft sunlight and the familiar smell of Midwest breeze. And hours later, as she arrived home in Texas and walked through the garden gate to find Chuck trimming his rose bushes in denim and dirt, he looked up, his smile soft and proud, and asked, "How was the trip?" To which she chuckled, kissed his cheek, and replied, "It had a moment or two," before they sat together on the porch sipping tea, two people bound not by fame or fear, but by a shared belief that the world still needed quiet heroes, the ones who didn't kick down doors or shout for attention, but who stood tall when it mattered most, held their ground with grace, and proved that true power lives not in fists, but in unshakable character. And as the stars blinked to life above them, Marianne's story traveled far beyond that train, not because of who she married, but because of who she chose to be.